Good evening and welcome to Speak Up for Our Planet. We are very, very glad to welcome you all. The circular economy is one where the output from one process is the beginning of the next. And this is a very important idea for us all to understand. So we have great pleasure in inviting Connor Bryant to speak to us this evening, because he doesn't just talk about the circular economy, he actually does it. He has two companies, the Rubbish Ideas and the Rubbish Project, both of which are entirely involved with the circular economy. So he's living the dream, and we look forward very much to hearing more about it. Please, everybody who's not speaking, would you mute yourself? Connor, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that introduction, Jane. So, as Jane said, I'm here to talk rubbish. I'm going to crack on. Unless I need this one. Right. The world has a rubbish problem. We are literally drowning in rubbish. And if you've been paying attention to the news, it would have you thinking that plastic is really the problem. But unfortunately, the problem is actually much, much bigger than that. We're wasteful with everything, from the food we eat, to the clothes we wear, to the buildings we build. Fishing plastic out of the ocean, banning straws, etc., is not the answer. It's not solving the problem. It's, a plaster. You don't bail out the bath water before you've turned off the tap. And this problem is really illustrated and brought about by our linear economy, okay? Which is where we're taking resources from the environment, we're making them into products, okay? And then those products are going to waste. And it is only traveling one way. At each stage of this process, we are causing massive destruction. So waste, huge mountains of waste, polluting our planet, filling up landfills, leaking into the ocean, or, in poorer countries, or on the streets, in people's homes. This may be the visible end of the problem, but unfortunately, the linear economy is destructive all the way through. The production of our products is incredibly polluting to our environment, not only releasing masses of gases and other chemicals into the atmosphere and environment, but also if you look at the destruction we cause when we're dyeing stuff, the water pollution, etc. So we're really destroying the planet with the way that we are currently making, consuming, and extracting resources, right? Because in order to make all of this stuff, we need to get the resources from somewhere. And currently, that means tearing apart our natural world, our living planet, our home, in order to extract resources that we need to make these products. But unfortunately, these products are used for an incredibly short period of time. So this is incredibly destructive at every stage of the process. But it's also absolute madness for one very simple reason. We have finite resources, okay? What does that mean? Well, it means there is only so much stuff. These piles of powder that you can see on the screen are rare earth metals. And they're called rare earth metals because they are rare. There is not that much of them. We know from scientific estimates that we have very limited amounts of these minerals in the entire planet. And that also there's a question about how accessible they are and the damage we have to do to the planet to access them. And yet, with not only these resources, with these resources and every other, we treat them like they are infinite. We treat them like we can keep on mining them forever and they will keep on just being there. But the reality couldn't be further from the truth. There are charts that show we are very close to running out of all of the rare earth metals on the screen within my lifetime. Okay, but these are the rare earth metals that we need for our technology, and that technology that is going to be used for our transfer to a more environmentally friendly planet. You know, these rare earth metals are used within not only our phones, but our solar panels and electric cars. So not just with these metals, with all resources, our approach to consuming them infinitely and producing more and more waste is inherently unsustainable. We cannot keep doing it. Like eating cookies from the cookie jar, one day there will be no more cookies. So, what is the solution? Well, as Jane introed here, the solution is a circular economy. The ethos of the circular economy is pretty simple. It's keep resources in an infinite loop as much as possible, okay? And by doing so, you reduce the harm at all stages of the process, right? Because if you're keeping resources in a loop, then you don't need new raw materials. So you can reduce the environmental destruction. You don't have to go and chop down the rainforest. You don't have to go and mine any more minerals because you have those minerals. You've already mined them and you're just keeping reusing them. Okay, and you know, at the same end, of course, you don't have waste because there is no waste in a circular economy. There is only resources that have come to the end of their life cycle in their current form that will be reused again. So with this approach, we can redesign our current economy to one that is sustainable and can go on forever. A circular economy could continue forever, and that would allow us to continually grow, economically develop, but with minimal resource impact, allowing us to live in harmony with our planet, with nature, and with the amount of resources that are available to us. The circular economy is guided by it's this overriding ethos of keeping materials in a loop, and it's guided by a set of principles. These are broken down in different ways or called the hierarchy. But my version of the hierarchy is as follows: reduce, rethink, reuse, repair, recycle. This is the process that you go through when thinking about how do we transition to a circular system. You approach it in this way. The first one, reduce. The most simple way of reducing our burden on the planet's resources and the amount of waste we produce is to simply stop consuming so much stuff. We can all understand that we have got into a habit of buying more than we need. Many of us can go into our closets, chest of drawers, kitchen cabinets, drawers, cupboards, etc., and find items that we bought and have never used. You know, this is wasteful and unnecessary, and it's the easiest thing that we can cut out in order to reduce the burden on the planet. Simply no stuff, not buying stuff, is the most environmentally friendly option. And that is always worth considering when you're thinking about buying an eco product. Yes, you want to buy environmentally friendly products, and yes, you want to support businesses that are selling environmentally friendly things. But if you don't need the product, it's not really an environmentally friendly purchase. So, you know, bear that in mind. That would be the first thing on the hierarchy of the circular economy. Okay, so the second one would be rethink, right? And what this means is that we can do things differently, and with different systems, we can be far less wasteful. I think a really good example of this is cars. Our current system is incredibly wasteful and polluting. The obvious thing is emissions, but moving past just switching to an electric vehicle, the concept of individual car ownership is incredibly wasteful. We use our cars less than 5% of the time. So 95% of the time they are sitting there idle, doing nothing. So they're a completely wasted resource, idling away. They take up masses of space on our streets and masses of resources to build. And yet we all individually want to own one, right? A new system would be one where you rethink that model and you think, right, well, actually, what people want is the freedom to go anywhere at any time using a vehicle, actually, ideally, of their choice, right? It would be more ideal if your vehicle could change sizes. One day it can fit 8 people, another day it's just you. So with that in mind, we could move towards a service model. Of course, this requires some new technology, but with driverless cars, what this will enable is a model where you don't own a car, you subscribe to a service. You select on an app, the car appears, and it's a car that's the right size and function for what you're doing. If you want to go camping, it's an off-road vehicle. If you want to go drive fast, it's a sports car. You know, you could have the car of your choice appear. And what's amazing is it means that when you're not using the car, it can be used by other people. So it means that we can have far less cars servicing as many people. So far less resources to build the cars and so on. And then the resources are being utilized all of the time. But it also means we don't have to have the problems of on-street parking, etc. So sometimes the best approach to a problem is to rethink how we are doing it. And invariably with the circular economy, the solution is often a service model. Provide people with the function that they want, the ability to get places, and not necessarily an object that they have to buy, own, and therefore consume. And the other thing that's great about service models is the company providing them is therefore incentivized to create durable products. In a sales model, you sell people products, you kind of want the product to break so you can sell them another one. And unfortunately, businesses now design products to break. Design obsolescence is a big thing. Whereas in a service model, you don't want the products that you're supplying to break ever, because then you have to repair it in order to continue providing your service. So it also encourages people to build durable products. And then it also encourages companies to be able to recover the resources from that product at the end. So service models are a good way that we can rethink how we are approaching providing products or services. So reuse, this is quite an obvious one. It gets talked about quite a lot. But obviously, if you reuse a product again and again and again, it is much better generally than having a disposable product, because you are not having to make something again each time and you're not creating waste. However, it is important to note that that is not always true. And the caveat is that reusable products, to be reusable, they have to be more durable. To be more durable, they generally have to be made well, which means a high energy investment to make them, because they generally have to have more material and be built of a sturdier construction, higher energy, more material, which means more environmental cost to make. In the case of a metal water bottle like this, it's great. This is a really environmentally friendly product in many ways. You could reuse it for your entire lifetime, and it's recyclable, and it can be made from recycled materials. However, the energy input that goes into making one of these means that you have to use it over 1,000 times before it is carbon equivalent to a disposable plastic bottle. That's okay if you plan to use this for once every day for 3 years, then you have met that threshold. But if you lost this bottle after a year, or someone bought you another one, or another one as a present, then of course, that starts to become more unattainable. And, I think that there is a problem with reusable products where people see reusable as just being good, and therefore it doesn't matter how many of them they have. Having lots of the same reusable product is not environmentally friendly. And the biggest case of this would be tote bags. So plastic bags are wasteful, but they are actually quite low energy to make. A cotton tote bag has a very high energy to make. So while it's a good reusable product that you can use for the rest of your life, if people are giving away tote bags after tote bag at an event, that is not environmentally friendly. That tote bag has 120 times the environmental cost of a plastic bag. So given that they are giving them away, it is a disposable thing. You already have bags, so that's not an environmentally friendly thing to do, and that's not an environmentally friendly way to use a reusable product. So reuse is great, but you've got to remember that reusable products, you're meant to reuse them for a very long time and not have lots of duplicates. If it performs that function again and again and again, why do you need more than one? Repair. So obviously things break and you could throw it away, but actually much better, much more environmentally friendly is to repair it. And this is especially true with something like clothes and electrical goods. And there's more and more of a model coming on this. And of course, Jane mentioned you've got a talk coming up on repair shops, etc. So I'm sure this is something you're very aware of. Cool company to look at and cool business model to adopt is people like Nudie Jeans, who have a thing of jeans for life. You buy a pair of jeans and they will continually repair those jeans for you throughout your life to ensure that those jeans last forever. And that is a new model of product and service for a company to be providing, and quite interesting to combine repair in there. So it's really quite a good part of the hierarchy as well, but hard to do. And finally, recycling. This is the bedrock of the circular economy. If you can't rethink it out of existence, or not consume it or reuse it, or it can't be repaired, then in order for those materials to stay in the circular economy, we need to recover them. So we need to recycle. And so that is the bedrock, because it's the last guard. Ultimately, everything needs to be, every form of waste that we produce, we should come up with a system for recycling or recovering in the case of, in the case of some things, or biodegradable materials and so on. So what am I doing about this? Well, as Jane mentioned, I've started 2 companies. One is Rubbish Ideas. We're a sustainable design consultancy. We help businesses to design environmentally friendly products, packaging, service models, supply chains, and waste management systems. So quite a broad range of things, but again, focused on this core principle of helping them transition to a circular model of business and using design as one of the core tools. It also involves doing some rather exciting projects, 3D printing large furniture or art pieces out of rubbish, and these giant 3D printers in shipping containers. And then we have the Rubbish Project, which is where we are working with large packaging companies that produce single-use disposable packaging and the consumers of these at scale, and redesigning their supply chain to be circular and tracking the recycling in order to give them the data to prove what's happening with a bit of tracking software that we've developed. So doing on higher, working with major brewers, fast food chains, etc. Really going after the highest volume waste in the sort of food service industry. So how can you get involved? What can you do to contribute to the circular economy? Well, when you saw the recycling thing earlier, that what people most associate with recycling is the diligent sorting that consumers have been doing in their own homes for the last 30 years. And this is wonderful, and it is really, it's a really good thing to have been doing. But unfortunately, we have, for too long, the focus has been on making consumers feel like it is your fault and making you do things in your own home, like sorting the waste. But unfortunately, if there's no demand for the material, if people aren't using recycled material to make stuff, then it doesn't matter how well you sort it in your home, there is no value to it. So the council will pick it all up, mix it all together and incinerate it. And, unfortunately, for the last 30 years, That has been the story for almost all plastics consumed in the home, and much of the cardboard, paper, and other products, and even metals as well. Because we haven't addressed, the government hasn't forced businesses to use recycled material when making products. And this is a key component in the chain, right? If we don't use recycled material to make products, where is it going to go once a recycler has granulated it? Well, the answer is there's no point in granulating it because no one would want the output, so they just burn it. So one of the key ways that you can get involved is buying recycled products, right? When you buy a laptop, a TV, a fridge, a table, a chair, your clothes, new building materials for your home, new windows, insulation, all of this stuff can be made from recycled materials. And the genius of using rubbish and using 100% recycled materials is that it starts to tackle the rubbish problem and waste problem head on. Because if your product is made from 100% rubbish, you will ultimately be removing more waste from the environment than you are putting out there, because you have to collect much more material than you end up using to make your product, because you end up collecting lots of waste, sorting it, and getting the material that you need for your thing. So you collect much more waste when trying to recycle than your outputs. And therefore, if you make things out of 100% recycled material, we will start to eat up all of the waste that is in the world. So it's a good way of tackling pollution and getting to the point where we start mining landfill sites. So buy recycled goods. The other one is getting involved in the sharing economy. So as I mentioned with the driverless car thing, is that we have moved towards this concept of individual ownership. And that's not because it's better for us, that's because it's better for companies because they can sell more products. It doesn't actually make sense as individuals to own everything that we own. I mean, you know, one of the most obvious things is if you look at a row of houses in a city with gardens, they will all have a lawnmower. They'll have all spent a few £100s on a not that good lawnmower. But of course, for much less money, they could all share one much better lawnmower, and it would be much cheaper for all of them, and they'd get a much better product and things. But that type of approach has not been encouraged by businesses because it was seen as antithetical to sales. But it is, of course, both better for the consumer, better for the environment, and so something to consider. And we can start doing this in our own homes. You know, me and my brothers share all of our clothes. We have regular meetups where we exchange and swap things. It doesn't work so well for my middle brother, who's a bit shorter than me and Monty, but for me and Monty, it works great. My car, I own a car, but I actually also have 5 other people on the insurance. That is not only my brother, but other local friends who I convinced to not get cars so that we could share a single car, because when living in a city, frankly, I very rarely need it, only to drive to rural Dorset where there isn't great public transport connections. So yeah, we can share much more things, and that's something we can all do in our homes really easily starting now. Tools are a good one. Every man owns drills and things, but we don't all need to own the same sets of tools. We can borrow and share and use much less resources in the process, and also save some money, which I think we could all appreciate. Right, so why should you trust me? I could just be one of those, you know, shouty Extinction Rebellion, block the road lot. Why should you listen to me? Why does the circular economy make sense? Well, the circular economy is biomimicry. It's copying nature. Natural cycles have been around for billions of years and will continue to exist for billions of years. The water cycle, the cycle of life and death, they are infinite and self-sustaining. And it is these models that we are trying to emulate with the circular economy so that we can learn from nature and live in harmony with it. And finally, the circular economy is inevitable. As I said earlier on in this talk, there is no sustainable way to consume finite resources other than the circular economy, right? We only have so much stuff. So at some point, humanity will realize that in order to keep using these resources, we have to recover the resources that we're throwing away. So given that it is inevitable, it only makes sense for us to try and given that it is not only inevitable, but required in order to help stave off the environmental apocalypses that we're facing, it only makes sense to try and accelerate this transition as much as possible. So I'm hoping following this talk, you will all go out there and be big advocates for the circular economy. You will adopt the practices that I've put out, buy recycled products, share more things, follow the hierarchy, okay? You know, reduce, rethink, reuse, repair, recycle. And thank you very much for listening. I'm really looking forward to some of your questions.
Thank you, Connor. Thank you very much indeed. I think some people would like to hear more about your businesses, but there are definitely some questions already in the chat. So I'm absolutely sure that there will be plenty of questions for you to get your teeth into. Rosie, do you want to start fielding the questions?
Yeah, first question actually from Peter in Toronto. He's saying, Connor, are you a profit or non-profit social entrepreneur? And but tell us a little bit more about that side of your business.
Okay, that's a very good question. So my business is for profit. It's, we're not a charity. The reason for that is that we believe in being a sustainable business. We're trying to do something that is pushing ahead of where the current consciousness is. And we don't want to have to go out there and raise funding through donation. We want to raise funding through changing businesses and showing them that they can make a profit from doing this and earn money through that way, and therefore be a self-sustaining, growing movement that doesn't require continual donation to support. There are plenty of environmental charities advocating these things. However, on the other side, that for me, this isn't a mission about personal wealth. I didn't set up this company to earn lots of money for myself, and I'm incredibly inspired by what the founder of Patagonia has done, and that might be one of the routes that I take if I ever am as anywhere near as successful as he is. But ultimately, I'm interested in securing my future and the future of my children and grandchildren far more than I'm interested in being a rich man at the end of the world. This is about survival more than it's about having luxuries that largely are quite wasteful in themselves.
Okay, thank you for that. One of the things I'd like to suggest is there's questions coming up about recycled materials, recycled things, So can I suggest if anybody has their favorite recycled go-to shop or outlet or whatever it is that uses recycled in its things, if people could pop that in the chat, that would be very useful tonight, because I'm desperately searching for one that I've seen recently, which is a furnishing store that's all recycled plastic bottles. So question from Peter, can recycled material be used for 3D printing? Because he's worked with a medical doctor whose approach was developing assistive devices to be printed in remote locations, including hospitals. And I think given our conversation just before we went on the recording about you can actually get very simple machines that shred, but do you need to have very specific types of plastics for 3D printing?
So I think I'm going to answer that question in multiple stages. Is that one, the first thing is that everything is technically recyclable, right? It contains the resources that we want. We are smart enough as humans to get it out of there. The main thing is that we haven't invested in that, right? If you look at an iPhone, is made up of hundreds, if not thousands, of individual tiny little parts assembled by robots, semi-transistors that are so small you couldn't even see them. We've invested masses in making our products. We haven't invested nearly enough in recycling. But in terms of what is technically possible, everything can technically be recycled. It contains all of the molecules that are the thing that we need. What's possible now, 3D printing with recycled plastics is entirely possible. There are lots of recycled filaments out there. In fact, we work closely with a company that produces recycled 3D printing filament in a range of different plastics, both recycled PLA, recycled PET, and some other recycled filaments. But we also, one of our partner companies, Colossus, built the world's largest transportable 3D printer designed to print with recycled materials. And with that, we compound pellets, not filament, but with all manner of recycled materials. We've ocean plastic, PPE, we've taken Adidas shoes, we've recycled hemp and PLA. We've actually done paper cups and wood pulp, all mixed in with recycled plastics that could be 3D printed in our printers. PET carbon is one of the things PET is a type of plastic, and carbon makes it really strong. And so that, yeah, we can make all sorts of recycled printable compounds. So it's entirely possible to 3D print with recycled materials today, not only in plastics, also in metal and in biomaterials. And of course, actually looking at construction, the process of 3D printing is, essentially just moving around and depositing material, right, in its most basic form. And of course, whether it's construction or whatnot, we could be using more recycled materials, and more of them have been developed all the time. So yes.
Okay, good. I would like to just ask if you could have supplementary on that. Can you give us an example of something that one company you've worked with has done a 3D? So can we have an example of how somebody you've worked with has taken that through, printed some component or something that perhaps it was linear before and now it's become either circular, or at least it's using recycled plastic? So we're just interested in examples.
Okay, well, yes, absolutely. I'd be delighted to give you. I'm not involving 3D printing. I could give you some examples involving 3D printing, but well, I'll start with 3D printing first. We worked with some companies that do stands at events. Okay. And if you ever go to a trade show, you see all these companies, they have these very fancy looking stands, lots of signs, etc. But of course, all of that is made of disposable materials. Well, not disposable materials, but it is treated as such. It's made of wood and metal and plastic, and they just throw it all away after the event. And make it again. This is incredibly wasteful, especially considering these trade shows are often on for only a couple of days, and you see the size of some of these stands. It's really an incredibly wasteful thing. And so what we did with a company that we are working with is we took some plastic waste that was a waste from one of their manufacturing facilities, and we compounded that waste. We turned it into a 3D printable compound. We 3D printed a trade show stand for them, which they then took to all of their trade shows and would use as their trade show stand and say, hey, our whole stand is made out of recycled waste. And then when they got bored of the design and they wanted a new design, they sent us back all of their trade show stands and signs and equipment. We ground it back down, 3D printed it into a whole new shape, style, and design, but with the same material. So that's a good example of, I suppose, switching to a circular model that used 3D printing. But 3D printing isn't a particularly scalable form of manufacturing, right? So it works in that case, building a one-off event stand, brilliant. And it works well for custom products as well. So it's good for the repair market and all those things. But another example I'd give of the circular economy acting at scale is the core thing I'm doing through the Rubbish Project. So with the Rubbish Project, we are working with the big brewers, people like AB InBev. You probably know Budweiser, Beer Moretti, those are their brands. Well, they own 20% of the drinks market. They own a lot of the beer brands, but they're, that company. They provide a lot of plastic cups to music festivals or football stadiums. And previously, these plastic cups were made from virgin plastic and would be used once and then thrown on the floor and would end up in landfill or the incinerator. And then we came along and we said, right, well, one, you're going to start using 100% recycled plastic cups. And two, we're going to work with the festivals and the football stadiums. We're going to redesign their waste management system. We're going to capture the cups, and we're going to ensure that the cups are collected and recycled back into new cups. So that is now a system that we operate with AB InBev and other brands and partners across Europe, Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany, Luxembourg, and starting up here in the UK. We've had some influence on the UK market, but have been more focused on the European, not least because there's more established recycling infrastructure there than in the UK, unfortunately.
Thank you very much for that. So, a question from Dominic. You mentioned different aspects of the circular economy don't benefit businesses, i.e. if we all share lawnmowers, there's not so many lawnmowers sold. Can this be resolved, do you think, and what are the realistic steps to make this happen?
The circular economy is great for businesses. The fact that the negatives is only a perception and a lack of open-mindedness, right? Because actually the fact that you don't have to make 10 lawnmowers could be better for a business, right? Instead of having to get the resources to make 10 products, you only need the resources to make one. And you as a business could be providing that lawnmower and renting it to all of the customers, right? Service models don't have to mean that businesses lose out. It actually also moves from a product model that is non-sticky, right, to a product model that is sticky. What does that mean? Well, if you sell a product to someone, they've now got that product, they don't necessarily need to come back to you. And even if the product breaks, they could buy another one, but they could buy it off another customer, right? Another company, okay? But like when you subscribe to your energy bill or your internet, it's quite annoying to change. You don't often change service providers. So you generally stick around with that. So actually switching to a service model can be great for businesses because it keeps the customers, their customers forever. Because if they're always going to need the service and you're always there providing it, there's a constant fee. So it doesn't have to be bad for businesses at all. And I suppose, again, the other side is that it is terrible for businesses to ignore the circular economy because it's like ignoring physics, right? There is only so much stuff. So if you are making products from stuff, it may feel like it's not that expensive at the moment, but that's because people are operating like there's an infinite amount of it. But I can tell you when people realize that there's not very much of it, suddenly that material is going to go up and up in price, which is of course happening all over the world all the time with raw material prices. They're going up and up and up. And they'll continue to do so because we will have less and less and less of them. So as a business, if you don't adopt a circular model, you're accepting that especially in a manufacturing business, you're accepting that your raw material prices are going to be continually going up, or at least will be continually dictated by market demand. That's the other thing, right? Is that when you buy material, you are buying it competing against other people, right? But once you own that material, it's then yours. And if you kept it and kept reusing it, then the cost of making your products is not the cost of your raw material, it's the cost of recovering your product. So you could make your product out of solid gold and diamonds, okay? Now, yes, it would have quite a high cost to make it, okay? But if you captured it and continually recycled it forever, then it's actually got a much lower cost over per use. So of course, that is an opportunity for businesses that they should exploit. They can have control their raw material and therefore not be swayed by market forces changing prices. And there are many more opportunities, but I could bang on about the circular economy opportunities forever. So I think more targeted question, probably a good idea.
Thank you. So, Connor, when you talk about recycled goods, do you mean secondhand or remanufactured? For example, secondhand could mean I'm being offered something that's been used to death. Whereas if I could buy a remanufactured, say, laptop, would it cost more than a new laptop?
Okay, gotcha. I understand. So, I mean, reusing. If you, for example, if someone hands you down clothes or you go to a charity shop, right? You know, reusing stuff that hand me down or being given something left over, that is the most environmentally friendly because they haven't had to put any resources into upgrading it. And of course, repairing can take much less resources in terms of environmental costs, although obviously the problem that we face in the world is that human time is one of the most expensive things. So repairing can cost a lot in terms of financially, but is very environmentally friendly. And then there's full on having a fully sort of recycled product made from recycled materials, but made new. And that at the moment would be the most expensive of the options, and I suppose the least environmentally friendly, as in because if you could just get a laptop off of someone or get a laptop off of someone and repair it slightly, that is better than making a whole new laptop, even if it's made out of recycled material. But of course, the making the laptop out of recycled material is the future, right? We're not going to be in a world where we can only consume stuff that we've already made. Charity shops isn't going to become the only shops. We're not, it's not going to be passed down forever and, we continue using Nokia phones. We are going to have to make new things, especially in the space of technology, as technology gets better, as we create new and improved products that can be more efficient as well. So actually, that would be the one caveat, is that when you make a new product, you can make it out of recycled materials, but you could also, in the case of an energy consuming product, make it consume much less energy. So in some cases, for example, buying a new fridge, if your fridge is incredibly old, it could be consuming so much energy that even though it's a working fridge, it's more environmentally friendly to throw away your working fridge and to buy a new, more efficient, hopefully made from recycled materials fridge, because then you're reducing the energy per use, but with a more efficient machine. So there is a bit of a thing in each scenario, but they're all good outcomes.
I think that picks up another interesting point that comes up a lot, and Brian's mentioned it. Brian from Spain has mentioned it, that we could potentially save a lot of raw materials by us all continuing driving our petrol car. So there's this point where we're trying to get the embodied carbon of the whole decision point, and it's really quite a hard, complex thing to do through. One thing that struck me is there a source of info about some of these interesting lifestyle choices, about where can I buy a recycled, like is there a recycled directory yet? Because that's what I'm beginning to hear that might be needed.
Unfortunately, I mean, there are places that try and bring it together a bit. There isn't, unfortunately, I'd say, a particularly good overall recycled directory that brings you to all of the recycled goods. In fact, it's an idea that we've had for quite a while. We called it the rubbish shop. We've actually built it, the front end and some of the back end and shop features, but I have only so much time, and we haven't been able to invest the time to launch that, and we would probably need a bit of funding behind us to do so, but yes, that is something that we'd be quite interested in doing, but there are, I mean, generally, I do this quite a lot. I just search the thing that I want and then put recycled after it into Google, and I mean, with a bit of smart searching, that really can throw up some pretty good things. And of course, there are blogs, various people out there who blog about these sort of things and create lists themselves in specific categories like fashion and so on. Yeah.
Michael Rye is pointing out that with many companies producing the same items.
Sorry, Rosie, do you mind go back? You also mentioned the thing about the cars, and I just wanted to jump in on that. Okay. There is not a rational argument for continuing to use fossil fuel burning cars. Okay, I just want to make that absolutely clear. There is no rational argument for continuing to use cars that burn fossil fuels. We should have given up on those a long time ago. We could have had electric trains and buses years ago and replaced individual car ownership with electric, zero carbon public transport. But this mindset of personal ownership is driven by consumerism, and that's what they're trying to drive. It's also why they're so keen on the electric car and trying to get you all to buy an individual electric car, and again, aren't focusing on the much cheaper, more accessible public transport upgrades, etc., that could easily be done to shift to that system. So petrol cars are dead. They are something that we should not be doing at all, and there is no excuse to keep doing them. Hybrid cars are a terrible idea as well. We shouldn't be wasting our time with these transitions. We need to accelerate. We don't have time to transition slowly to a low carbon economy. We need to move very quickly. And while building new cars takes resources, it's part of the, there is going to be an environmental cost to our transition, but the environmental cost of doing nothing is far, far greater.
Okay. I think there's I hope I'm getting Michael Rye's point correct. With many companies are producing the same items like cars, computers, glass, etc. Would you call a halt to introducing new technology and thereby save on new production costs, and just ask them to keep making the technology they've got?
I mean, no, I don't think that's realistic. And I also don't think that's what we want. We don't want to stifle innovation. Innovation is a good thing. While this approach has led to the production of more and more stuff, it has also led to the production of more and more efficient products that can do and help humans with the tasks that we need to do in more efficient ways. Many people would look at the iPhone and smartphones as being very wasteful and a wasteful example of technology. But you've also got to remember that an iPhone combines the tools of a flashlight, a calculator, camera, and many other things all into one single product. And that sort of efficiency that we get through technology is incredible. And it's that drive for innovation that gives us the tools that are required for tackling these problems. That being said, there are also many companies that make products where they aren't pushing forward innovation. They aren't actually making a new thing that we really need. They are just making something to sell you. I mean, my sort of pet peeve with this would be toothbrushes, electric toothbrushes. There's a best way to brush your teeth, and they know that, and we all know that. They want to keep selling you products, so they will sell more heads with thing fangs and this and that, and they will just keep inventing more and more products so they can keep selling you stuff. Obviously, we want less of that, but that is something that we as consumers need to stop making those silly purchase decisions. And government can regulate against a bit, but I think that trying to ban the development of new technology, I don't think would help us in the long run.
I think there's some comments here about if you make it better, you can buy less and increase unemployment. So yes, so just thinking of it that way. The other interesting fear, and I think, but also reasonable question about a service model is you are then very tied in to that, manufacturer or producer. And history says that, if you don't have lots of choice and you get very tied in, you can also get slowly poorer service, as anyone who's been tied into utility for a long time will know. So interesting point there about how in a service model do you keep the service provider good and keen and making sure that they are providing the very best materials and things, but doing it in an environmentally friendly way.
Well, that's a good point. Of course, any system is open to exploitation, and of course, our current system is rife with it. What I would say is that obviously, in this case, actually, often in the businesses that people have moved to having service models, also combined with this sharing economy approach, where you are connecting more with the other people, and of course, that you then have the ability to both collectively group together to demand services or things or go to another thing, or also the transparency of being able to rate and appraise services. So actually giving them ratings that stick to them. And of course, part of this transition into the circular economy is about having more accountability on supply chains and how products are made and the service they're providing to you. But ultimately, it's not a silver bullet. If people want to abuse a service model, they can. But of course, as I say, I think that abuse could only really be stopped through regulation, as is the case in our current system.
Well, we've covered a lot of things. Are there any more questions? There's quite a lot of comments, which I appreciate. There's a lot of good stuff on the chat. If you haven't been watching it, there's a lot of good ideas from people about various providers of green things. There's also a lot of chat about electric car batteries, which if you don't mind, Brian, we're not going to go into tonight. I think we've done that one. Peter's got a final good question. What's the role of government in stimulating this circular economy approach?
Well, the role of government should be massive, but they have been phenomenally asleep at the wheel, and shockingly still are. And of course, as we all talk a lot about carbon and carbon in the news, we are still ignoring the circular economy and even though it is a massive contributor to carbon and environmental destruction, it is still largely ignored by legislators. And so this is a real problem. But there is, both from the penalizing point of view and the incentive point of view, really we should have massive carbon taxes taxes on things that take into account the environmental cost of a raw material. So bauxite, which we use to make aluminium, comes from under rainforests. If everyone knew that to get bauxite, you had to chop down the rainforest to get the aluminium, I think we'd think, God, probably shouldn't use so much aluminium, or aluminium should be a bit more expensive, right? So, but we don't take into account currently, governments don't factor in the environmental cost into raw materials, but that's what they should be doing through legislation, right? If in order to extract a raw material, you have to destroy the environment, we should work out the cost of repairing the destruction you've done and add that to the cost of your raw material. I always think this is a bit like the example that I think everyone can understand is nuts, right? Which is that chewing gum companies earn less money selling chewing gum than it costs governments around the world to remove chewing gum from the roads. Ergo, we as taxpayers fund the chewing gum industry, both by buying their products and then to pay the government more money to clean it up, right? That's nuts. But it's also an example of not having factored in the cost, the real cost of that product into the product. And we're doing that with all of our raw materials as well. So the government should be taking a real lead on that. And at the moment, they're actually doing the opposite, right? I work a lot with recycled plastics. And when I try and get a company to use recycled plastics, what do they tell me? Well, they tell me what the price of virgin plastic is. How do we make virgin plastic? Well, we make virgin plastic with oil. And oil has been subsidized by governments around the world to the tune of $2 trillion or more dollars per annum to these companies. So I am fighting whenever we try and sell recycled materials, you're competing against a government subsidied virgin plastic, right? So it's not even a fair fight. And so, yeah, governments need to totally change their approach, stop supporting and funding and endorsing the people destroying the planet, tax them, and start rewarding and reducing and providing tax cuts to products that are good for the planet. I mean, one of the things that, Dale Vince suggested and many others have advocated for is the scrapping of VAT on environmentally friendly products. Obviously, we have to have a clear discussion about what an environmentally friendly product is, but not have any of the greenwashers sneak in. But that sort of thing is the type of stimulus that governments need to be making, but isn't being done.
Thank you very much, Connor. Can you put your email address in the chat, please, Connor? I think a few people are very interested to have that, and I'll pass back to Jane.
Yes, I've got a couple of points. One is that there have been lots of really good suggestions, tips, information about different organizations that people can get hold of. I will pick all of these up off the chat and I will share them in our newsletter. So if you don't get the newsletter and you'd like these things, you just have to write to this address and ask to be put onto the circulation list for the newsletter. That was one thing. Another thing was Connor's email address, which we've already asked for. And I think what you've been saying for a few minutes, Connor, is basically the government has it within their power to making the right decisions a no-brainer, but they don't.
Exactly.
There are some countries in the world where, for example, it just simply doesn't make any sense to have a car that uses petrol because they've made the costing just completely an easy decision. And I'm not trying to suggest it's simple, but some of this stuff, people will do what makes sense. They'll do what's easiest, what's cheapest.
Oh yeah, Costa Rica is a wonderful example. Costa Rica have managed to regrow 30% of the rainforest cover in their country over the last 40 years, and that's thanks to the government totally changing the incentive structure so it pays to protect the rainforests, not to chop it down. Very simple. It's actually done marvels for the Costa Rican economy. And they've been 100% renewably powered for many years now. And if they can do it, so can we. And frankly, we should have beaten them to it, not be flagging far behind. And one final thing, when you mentioned that government having failed to act, of course there is a reason for this, that many of our politicians unfortunately have vested interests and direct investments in the businesses that are destroying the planet and profiting from these destructive business models. Liz Truss literally used to work for Shell, so no wonder she doesn't want to support a windfall tax on them. Look at the Tories energy minister as well and his background, and you can see that you haven't got people making fair decisions, you've got them making biased decisions, supporting their own interests.
Right. Okay. Before we get too party political, it's not what we're all about. Connor, that has been fascinating, and you can tell by the number of questions, some controversial, some less so, some genuinely interested, that this has been a great talk which has got us involved, got us thinking. And we will be following up with this repair shop, scrap shop idea. And I think the link between the two and the sorts of tips that we've been getting on the chat this evening mean that will be a lively session as well. And I'm sure everybody can figure out that the two things are very closely linked. Connor's doing it as a business, but there are loads of people who are doing it just, in little ways on the street corner and in small shops and so forth. But it's all still the same thing. It's all repairing and reusing and recycling and keeping stuff out of landfill and using it lots and lots of times. So many, many, many thanks, Connor. Thank you very much for taking time out of your busy life to share this with us. And let's give him a round of applause. Even if we're on
Thank
mute.
you. Thank you. Very kind.